the silence beneath the surface of a dead world is absolute. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of waiting. Of mechanisms held in perfect suspension for millions of years, their internal clocks counting down epochs as civilizations rise and fall on the surface above. In the deepest chambers of these tomb worlds, where the Necrons sleep their endless sleep, something stirs. Not the ancient masters of these crypts, not yet, but their servants, the tireless guardians who never truly slumber. And today, they have discovered something that should not exist within their master's domain. Something that radiates heat and energy where only cold metal should rest. Something massive, something that was never meant to be here. Deep within a tomb, world designated in Imperial records as Mortis 7 Alpha, but known to the Necrons as Carnatash, the awakened realm, a Canoptech wraith phases through solid stone on its eternal patrol. Its sensors detect an anomaly. The density readings are wrong. The chamber ahead shows signs of structural collapse that occurred not millions of years ago, but mere millennia past. A geological eye blink in the long memory of the tomb. The wraith advances, its phase shifter, allowing it to slip through collapsed corridors as easily as moving through air. It emerges into a cavity that should not exist, a vast space carved by violence and filled with something utterly alien to the tomb's ancient architecture. There, half buried in the rubble of what was once the tomb's outer defensive layer, lies a Titan. An Imperial Reaver-class battle Titan, to be precise. Its void shields long since depleted. Its plasma reactor dormant and cold. The great war machine lies on its side like a fallen god, one arm still clutching the massive bulk of a turbo-laser destructor, the other buried beneath thousands of tons of stone. Its carapace, once emblazoned with the heraldry of Legio Metallica, is scarred and pitted with damage. Whatever battle brought this god engine to this place was catastrophic. Whatever fate left it here, buried and forgotten, has sealed it in a tomb that predates human civilization by 60 million years. The Canoptech Wraith's processors work through scenarios at speeds that would make cogitator arrays seem sluggish. This is unprecedented. Foreign technology within the tomb's boundaries. A contamination of the sanctified depths. The construct's priority matrices crystallize into a singular imperative: assess, report, and await further directives from the tomb's master program. It begins a comprehensive scan of the intruder, its sensors probing every surface, measuring every dimension, analyzing every material signature. The data streams back through the tomb's dimensional network, awakening systems that have not activated in epochs, and in chambers far below, where the true masters of this world lie in their sarcophagi, deep within the throne rooms and crypts of nobility, the first stirrings of consciousness begin. The discovery raises questions that echo through the awakening neural networks of the tomb. How did this machine arrive here? When did it penetrate the tomb's defenses? Is it a threat, or merely debris from the surface world? And most intriguingly of all, what is this technology? The Necrons, who fought the war in heaven and brought gods to heal, who commanded power that makes the greatest achievements of younger races look like children's toys, find themselves examining the work of beings who, in the cosmic scale, were born mere moments ago. Yet this crude, primitive machine is massive, powerful, built with a purpose that any warrior culture would recognize: to dominate the battlefield and break the will of enemies through sheer might and firepower. This is the story of what happens when two ancient powers collide. When the sleeping dead discover that their tomb has been breached by a god engine of the Imperium. When Necron technology, which predates the rise of humanity by millions of years, encounters Imperial technology that the Mechanicus considers holy. When the question becomes not just what to do with this intruder, but what can be learned from it, and how it changes the strategic calculus of a dynasty awakening to find the galaxy utterly transformed. We are about to witness the intersection of technologies separated by vast stretches of time, the meeting of cultures that should never have crossed paths, and the decisions that will ripple through both the Imperium of Man and the Necron dynasties for centuries to come. The eternal sleep of tomb worlds. To understand what it means for a Titan to be discovered within a Necron tomb, we must first comprehend the nature of these ancient crypts and the beings that slumber within them. A Necron tomb world is not simply a burial ground or a storage facility. It is a technological marvel beyond the comprehension of most races in the galaxy, a perfectly preserved time capsule containing the remnants of a civilization that once ruled the stars when the old ones still walked among the living. 60 million years ago, give or take a few million years, in the imprecise measurements of deep time, the Necrontyr made their final transformation. Having been betrayed by the Catan, the star gods they had foolishly allied with during the war in heaven, having won that terrible conflict at the cost of their very souls, the Necrons faced a galaxy in ruins. The old ones were destroyed or scattered. The Aeldari Empire was rising in their place, young and vital and filled with dangerous potential. The Necrons themselves were no longer the beings they had once been. The biotransference that turned them from flesh to living metal had stolen more than just their bodies. It had taken their capacity for joy, for love, for all the subtle emotions that make life worth living. What remained were beings of pure will and purpose, immortal but empty, powerful but hollow. The Silent King, Sarek, made the only decision that seemed rational in the face of this new reality. The Necrons would sleep. They would retreat into specially prepared tomb complexes scattered across the galaxy, protected by the most sophisticated stasis technology their civilization could devise. They would wait, suspended in a state between existence and non-existence, while the younger races exhausted themselves in conflicts and the galaxy forgot the terror of the Necron dynasties. When they awoke, the galaxy would be ripe for reconquest, and the Necrons would reclaim their ancient dominion over the stars. The construction of these tomb worlds represented the final, greatest achievement of Necron engineering. Each tomb was a masterpiece of defensive architecture, designed to protect its sleeping occupants from every conceivable threat. The tombs were buried deep, often kilometers beneath the surface, shielded by layers of living metal that could repair themselves from damage. They were protected by dimensional stabilizers that made them nearly impossible to detect from the surface, by energy fields that could deflect or absorb attacks, by automated defense systems that could respond to intrusions with deadly force. But the tombs were more than just fortresses. They were cities in miniature, vast underground complexes containing everything the Necrons would need upon awakening. Resurrection forges capable of repairing damaged necrodermis, weapon vaults storing armaments that could level continents, throne rooms and audience chambers where Necron nobility could hold court and plan their campaigns. And most importantly, the tombs contained the management systems that would ensure the Great Sleep proceeded according to plan. These systems were not simple timers or alarm clocks. They were sophisticated artificial intelligences, the master programs that governed every aspect of the tomb's function. These programs monitored each stasis chamber, ensuring that the entropic decay was held at bay. They directed the canoptech constructs, the robotic servants that remained active during the long sleep, maintaining the tomb's systems and making repairs as needed. They assessed environmental conditions on the surface, calculating when it would be safe for the tomb's occupants to emerge. And they implemented strict protocols for awakening, ensuring that the revival of the tomb's population would proceed in an orderly and predictable fashion. The canoptech constructs themselves deserve special attention, for they are the eyes and ears of the sleeping tomb, the loyal servants who keep watch while their masters rest. These machines come in various forms, each designed for specific tasks. The canoptech scarabs are the most numerous, tiny robotic insects that swarm through the tomb's corridors, performing basic maintenance and repairs. Their bodies are made of the same living metal as the Necrons themselves, capable of breaking down damaged materials and rebuilding them at the molecular level. When a section of the tomb's structure becomes compromised, thousands of scarabs descend upon it, their mandibles clicking as they consume corroded metal and replace it with fresh material. The canoptech spiders are larger, more sophisticated constructs that serve as mobile factories and repair stations. These multi-legged machines can fabricate new scarabs as needed, directing them to areas that require attention. They carry sophisticated sensors that can detect the subtlest signs of damage or degradation, and their fabricator claws can perform delicate repairs that require more precision than the scarabs can manage. During the Great Sleep, the spiders are the architects and engineers, maintaining the tomb's infrastructure and ensuring that everything remains in perfect working order. But it is the canoptek wraiths that serve as the tomb's security force. These sleek, serpentine constructs phase in and out of normal spacetime, their dimensional destabilization matrices allowing them to pass through solid matter as if it did not exist. They patrol the tomb's endless corridors, their advanced sensors detecting any anomaly, any change, any intrusion. Unlike the scarabs and spiders, which focus on maintenance, the wraiths are programmed for a single purpose: to eliminate any threat to the sleeping Necrons. They can phase their claws and tendrils inside an enemy, solidifying them to sever vital systems from within. They can phase through walls and floors to attack from unexpected angles. And they can detect intruders with such precision that even the most advanced stealth systems provide little protection. These constructs operate according to the directives of the tomb's master program, but they are not mindless automata. Each canoptek construct possesses sophisticated decision matrices that allow it to respond appropriately to unexpected situations. They can analyze threats, adapt their tactics, and even coordinate with one another to address complex problems. When one construct detects something unusual, it can share that information with others through the tomb's dimensional network, allowing the entire canoptek swarm to respond as a unified intelligence. For 60 million years, this system worked exactly as intended. The Necrons slept. The canoptek constructs maintained the tombs. The galaxy above went through transformations that the sleeping dynasties could not have imagined. The age of technology rose and fell. Humanity spread across the stars in its first great diaspora. The age of strife consumed human civilization in flames and madness. The Emperor united terror and launched the Great Crusade. The Horus heresy tore the Imperium apart. Through all of this, the Necrons remained in their tombs, waiting for the time when they would rise again. But the Great Sleep did not proceed perfectly. Millions of years is a long time, even for technology as sophisticated as that of the Necrons. Entropy is patient and relentless, and even living metal can degrade if given enough time. Some tombs suffered catastrophic failures, their stasis systems malfunctioning and leaving their occupants to decay into dust. Others were destroyed by external forces, buried beneath geological upheavals, or vaporized by stellar events. Still others were discovered by younger races who had no idea what they had found. Their ignorant meddling triggering awakening protocols prematurely or damaging systems beyond the ability of the canoptek constructs to repair. And then there were the tombs that awakened on their own, their internal clocks determining that sufficient time had passed, or their sensors detecting changes in the galaxy that warranted investigation. These early awakenings were sporadic and uncoordinated. The central command that Sharek had maintained over the Necron dynasties no longer existed, for the Silent King had departed into the void, leaving his people to sleep without his guidance. Each tomb that awakened did so in isolation, its master program making decisions based on local conditions without knowledge of the broader situation. What these awakened tombs discovered was a galaxy utterly transformed. Where once the Necron Empire had been unchallenged, now countless younger races squabbled over the ruins of what had been. The Imperium of Man dominated much of the galaxy, a vast and sprawling empire that dwarfed anything the Necrons had encountered before the Great Sleep. The forces of chaos, which had barely existed during the War in Heaven, now commanded powers that could rival even the Catan. The Tyranids, utterly unknown to Necron records, devoured entire sectors with their insatiable hunger. And everywhere, on worlds that the Necrons considered rightfully theirs by ancient claim, alien civilizations had established themselves, building on land that the Necrons' ancestors had walked millions of years before. The awakening Necrons responded to this reality in various ways. Some dynasties, particularly those with strong and intact leadership, immediately began campaigns of reconquest, marshalling their forces to reclaim their ancient territories. Others, badly damaged by the long sleep, focused on survival and rebuilding, trying to restore their strength before engaging with the younger races. Still others adopted more cautious strategies, observing and learning about this new galaxy before committing to action. But perhaps the most important aspect of the tomb world's awakening is the hierarchy with which it proceeds. When a tomb begins to wake, either through its own internal programming or in response to an external threat, it does not simply activate all of its inhabitants at once. The process is carefully orchestrated, each stage designed to assess the situation and ensure that the proper forces are brought online to address whatever challenges the tomb faces. The first to awaken are always the Necron warriors, the basic infantry units that form the backbone of any Necron army. These are the simplest Necrons, the ones who lost the most in the biotransference, reduced to little more than autonomous weapons, with barely any consciousness remaining. They awaken quickly, their systems coming online within hours, and they immediately begin reconnaissance of the tomb's immediate surroundings. They patrol the upper levels, checking for breaches or damage, and they venture to the surface to assess what has changed in the world above. The information gathered by these initial scouts feeds back into the tomb's master program, which then determines what additional forces are required. If the tomb is secure and the surface world appears peaceful, the awakening may proceed slowly, bringing online only the systems and personnel needed for basic operations. But if the warriors encounter resistance, if they find the tomb under threat, the awakening accelerates dramatically. Next to be activated are the more specialized units, the Immortals, elite infantry, equipped with more sophisticated weapons and capable of tactical thinking far beyond that of the basic warriors. The Lich Guard, the sworn protectors of the nobility, whose very purpose is to defend the tomb's lords. The Deathmarks, assassins who can phase through dimensions to strike at enemies from impossible angles. Each of these units represents a greater investment of the tomb's resources, consuming more power and requiring more complex resurrection protocols. As the situation demands, the tomb begins to activate its vehicles and heavy support. The Ghost Arks, transport vehicles capable of carrying warriors into battle and repairing them on the move. The Annihilation Barges, anti-aircraft platforms bristling with Tesla weaponry. The Doomsday Arcs, heavy artillery pieces that can level fortifications with their primary cannons. And if the threat proves severe enough, the tomb may even activate its to tangent scale constructs, the monoliths and obelisks that serve as mobile fortresses, capable of teleporting reinforcements directly to the battlefield and devastating enemy formations with concentrated firepower. Finally, if all other measures prove insufficient, the tomb's true masters begin to wake. The cryptechs, scientists, and technologists who command powers that seem like sorcery to younger races. The lords and overlords, nobles who once commanded armies during the war in heaven, and who retain the strategic brilliance that made the Necrons masters of the galaxy. And in the rarest cases, the Pharaons themselves, the supreme rulers of entire dynasties, beings of such power and authority that their very presence can shift the course of galactic events. This hierarchical awakening serves multiple purposes. It conserves the tomb's energy reserves, ensuring that power is not wasted on activating forces that are not needed. It protects the nobility from premature exposure to danger, keeping them safe until the situation is fully assessed. And it provides time for the tomb's systems to fully boot up, running diagnostics and ensuring that everything is functioning properly before committing the most valuable assets. But this system, elegant as it is, was designed to handle threats from the outside. External invasions by Aeldari forces seeking to destroy the tombs before the Necrons could fully awaken. Attacks by Xenos species that stumbled upon the tomb worlds by accident. Even interference from the forces of chaos, though the Necron's soulless nature provides some protection from the worst effects of the warp. What the system was never designed to handle, what no Necron architect ever contemplated, was the possibility that something massive and dangerous might already be inside the tomb, buried deep within its structure through sheer accident of geology and time. This is the situation that the tomb world of Carnitash now faces. A Reaver-class battle titan of the Imperium, entombed within the very foundations of the Necron crypts. Not an invader in the conventional sense, but a piece of technology from a civilization that did not even exist when the tombs were sealed. A massive, complex machine that radiates energy signatures completely foreign to Necron sensors, an anomaly that demands immediate attention and careful analysis. And as the Canoptech Wraith completes its initial scan and transmits its findings to the tomb's master program, deep within the command protocols, decisions are being made, priorities are being reassessed, and in the darkness of the crypts, systems long dormant begin to power up, preparing to address this unprecedented situation. Imperial Titans, walking gods of war. To fully appreciate the significance of a Titan being discovered within a Necron tomb, we must understand what these machines represent to the Imperium of man. Titans are not merely weapons, they are icons of faith, manifestations of the machine god's power, walking cathedrals that bring the Emperor's judgment to the battlefield. They are among the most powerful war machines ever created by humanity, and their presence on a battlefield can turn the tide of entire campaigns. When a Titan strides to war, the ground itself trembles beneath its footfalls, and its enemies know that death walks among them. The history of Titans stretches back to the Dark Age of technology, that legendary period when humanity's scientific and technological achievements reached heights that have never since been equaled. During this era, humanity spread across the galaxy in a great wave of colonization, establishing settlements on thousands of worlds. These colonists often found themselves facing hostile environments, worlds where the atmosphere was toxic, the gravity crushing, or the native life forms deadly. The first Titans were created to address these challenges, massive exosuits that allowed humans to move and work in conditions that would otherwise be impossible to survive. These early Titans were primarily construction and mining machines, though they could be armed for defense against aggressive Xenos species or dangerous fauna. They stood tens of meters tall, their armored carapaces protecting their operators from environmental hazards, their powerful limbs capable of moving massive amounts of material or wielding tools that could cut through solid rock. They were marvels of engineering, combining sophisticated artificial intelligence with human intuition and creativity, controlled through neural interfaces that allowed the pilot to merge their consciousness with the machine. But as the age of strife descended and humanity's great empire collapsed into warfare and chaos, the peaceful purposes of these machines were quickly forgotten. Titans became weapons of war, their construction tools replaced with guns and energy weapons, their mining lasers repurposed to cut through enemy armor and fortifications. On Mars, where the cult Mechanicus was consolidating its power, the construction of Titans became a sacred art, a way of honoring the machine god by creating the most perfect fusion of human will and mechanical power. The Titans that emerged from this transformation were no longer mere machines. They were god engines, mechanical avatars of the Omnissiah's wrath. The tech priests of Mars, who would later become the Adeptus Mechanicus, devoted themselves to perfecting these designs, creating standardized patterns that could be replicated across different forge worlds, while still allowing for customization and specialization. The Mechanicus believed that each Titan contained a fragment of the machine god's consciousness, a machine spirit that was not merely a sophisticated program, but a genuine intelligence worthy of worship and respect. This belief shaped how Titans were constructed and operated. Each Titan was built not in a factory, but in a sacred forge, where tech priests chanted prayers and performed rituals while they assembled the components. The construction of a Titan could take years or even decades, each part carefully crafted and blessed before being integrated into the whole. The plasma reactors that powered these machines were treated with particular reverence, for they were the hearts that gave the Titans life. The void shields that protected them were seen as manifestations of the machine god's protection, and the weapons they carried were instruments of divine judgment, tools through which the Omnissiah's will would be made manifest. The pilots of Titans, called Princeps, underwent extensive training and modification to prepare them for their role. They were not simply drivers or operators, but priests in their own right, individuals who had dedicated their lives to the service of the machine god and been found worthy of merging their consciousness with a god engine. The princeps would be surgically enhanced with neural implants that allowed them to interface directly with the Titan's systems, creating a symbiotic relationship between human and machine. When a princeps connected with their Titan through the throne mechanicum, the command seat that served as the interface point, they ceased to be merely human. They became something more, their consciousness expanding to encompass the Titan's vast sensor arrays, its weapon systems, its structural integrity. They could feel the Titan's pain when it was damaged, its rage when it engaged enemies, its satisfaction when it destroyed those who stood against it. But this merging came at a cost. The machine spirit of a Titan was powerful and demanding, and it required a strong will to maintain control over it. Princeps, who spent too long merged with their Titans, found their personalities beginning to change, adopting the aggressive, domineering characteristics of the war machines they commanded. Some lost themselves entirely, becoming little more than extensions of their Titans, unable to separate their own identities from that of the machine. To help maintain balance, princeps were accompanied by moderati, assistant operators who helped manage the Titan's systems and provided a human anchor that could help prevent the princeps from being overwhelmed. The Titans themselves were organized into legions, military formations that operated from forge worlds across the galaxy. Each legion had its own heraldry, traditions, and battle honors, stretching back thousands of years. Some legions were famous for their loyalty to the Imperium, having fought in the Great Crusade alongside the Emperor himself. Others had turned traitor during the Horus Heresy, their Titans becoming corrupted by chaos and transformed into demon engines that served the ruinous powers. And still others maintained a careful neutrality, serving whatever faction could meet their price or convince them that the cause was just. The classifications of Titans reflected both their size and their tactical role on the battlefield. The smallest were the Scout Titans, machines that stood 30 to 40 meters tall and were designed for reconnaissance and rapid response. The most common Scout Titan was the Warhound class, a lean and agile machine that could move at surprising speeds despite its massive size. Warhounds typically operated in pairs, called hunting packs, using their speed and coordination to outmaneuver larger opponents and strike at vulnerable points. They were armed with weapons that, while devastating by the standards of conventional warfare, were relatively modest for Titans: turbo lasers and plasma weapons that could destroy tanks and infantry formations, but which struggled against heavier opposition. The backbone of any Titan legion consisted of battle Titans, machines that ranged from 50 to 80 meters in height and mounted significantly heavier weapons. The most numerous of these was the Warlord class, a general-purpose combat platform that could be configured for a variety of roles depending on the weapons it carried. A Warlord could mount volcano cannons capable of melting through fortress walls, plasma destructors that reduced enemy formations to ash, or Gatling blasters that could cut down infantry by the thousands. They were protected by multiple void shield generators, energy fields that could absorb incredible amounts of damage before collapsing, and their armor was thick enough to shrug off attacks that would destroy lesser vehicles. Larger than the Warlords were the Reaver-class Titans, machines that occupied a middle ground between battle Titans and the truly massive Emperor class. Reavers stood approximately 60 meters tall and were known for their versatility, capable of engaging in close combat with massive power fists or maintaining distance with long-range bombardment weapons. They were reliable and relatively common, though the Adeptus Mechanicus considered them among the most complex Titans to maintain, requiring constant attention from tech priests to keep their systems functioning properly. And then there were the Emperor-class Titans, the true giants of the Titan legions. These monsters stood well over 100 meters tall, some reaching heights of 140 meters or more. They were walking fortresses, their upper structures resembling ornate Gothic cathedrals complete with spires, stained glass viewing ports, and chapels where crews could worship between battles. The most common Emperor-class Titans were the Imperators, general-purpose assault platforms that could devastate entire armies with their firepower. An Imperator mounted enough weapons to equip several smaller Titans, including massive Hellstorm cannons, Apocalypse missile launchers, plasma annihilators, and countless secondary weapons for anti-infantry and anti-aircraft defense. The Warmonger-class Emperors were even more specialized, designed purely for long-range fire support, with targeting systems so sophisticated they could hit targets from beyond visual range with pinpoint accuracy. These Titans were rare even among the already uncommon Emperor class, and their loss was considered a catastrophe for any legion that suffered it. The construction of an Emperor-class Titan represented decades of work and resources that could have equipped entire armies, and the Adeptus Mechanicus had lost the complete knowledge of how to build new ones. Every Emperor Titan still in service was a relic from earlier ages, maintained through painstaking effort and treated with the reverence due to irreplaceable artifacts. When a Titan went to war, it was not simply deployed like a tank or aircraft. The entire process was treated as a sacred ritual. The Titan would be awakened from its dormancy in the Legion's fortress monastery, its machine spirit roused through prayers and offerings. The princeps and their crew would undergo purification rituals, cleansing themselves of any spiritual taint that might interfere with their connection to the God Engine. The Titan would be blessed by the Legion's highest-ranking tech priests, anointed with sacred oils and inscribed with prayers of victory. And when it finally strode forth to battle, it did so with the full understanding that it carried not just weapons, but the hopes and faith of all who served the machine god. On the battlefield, Titans were force multipliers beyond compare. A single warhound could turn the tide of a battle involving thousands of troops, its weapons capable of destroying enemy vehicles and fortifications that would otherwise require extensive artillery bombardment. A warlord could break sieges that had lasted months, its firepower punching through defensive lines that had seemed impregnable. And an Emperor Titan could decide the fate of entire campaigns, its very presence on the battlefield shifting the strategic calculus and forcing enemy commanders to commit resources they could not afford to spare. But Titans were not invincible. Despite their massive size and formidable defenses, they could be destroyed through concentrated firepower or clever tactics. Enemy Titans posed the most direct threat, as only a Titan could reliably match another Titan in combat. But other threats existed as well. Coordinated attacks by aircraft could overwhelm a Titan's void shields and inflict critical damage. Orbital bombardment could catch a Titan in the open and obliterate it before it could find cover. And sometimes, through sheer bad luck or catastrophic failure, a Titan's plasma reactor could suffer a critical containment breach, causing the machine to detonate in a blast that could level everything within kilometers. When a Titan fell in battle, it was mourned by its entire legion. The loss was not just tactical, but spiritual, a diminishment of the legion's strength and a blow to the morale of all who served. Every effort would be made to recover the Titan's remains, to salvage what could be saved, and give the fallen God Engine the funeral rites it deserved. But sometimes, recovery was impossible. Battles were lost, and the victors claimed the wreckage. Campaigns turned into disasters, and retreats became so chaotic that there was no choice but to abandon the fallen. And in rare cases, catastrophic events buried Titans so completely that they vanished from all records, their fates unknown even to the Adeptus Mechanicus that had built them. This brings us to the Titan, now resting within the Necron tomb of Carnatash. According to the fragmentary records that can still be read on its scarred carapace, this machine was designated Eternal Vigilance, a Reaver-class Titan of Legio Metallica, the Iron Skulls. It participated in campaigns during the Great Crusade, walking alongside the Legiones Astartes as they brought the Emperor's light to the darkest corners of the galaxy. It survived the Horus Heresy, remaining loyal to the Imperium even as other legions fell to chaos. For thousands of years, it served faithfully, its name inscribed on countless battle honors, its deeds recorded in the sacred archives of Mars. But at some point, on some forgotten battlefield on this world that would later become the Necron tomb world of Carnatash, Eternal Vigilance fell. Perhaps it was brought down by enemy fire, its void shields overwhelmed, and its reactor critically damaged. Perhaps it was caught in a geological catastrophe, buried beneath an earthquake or volcanic eruption. Perhaps it simply suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure at the worst possible moment, leaving it immobilized and vulnerable in the middle of a combat zone. Whatever the cause, the result was the same. The Titan fell. Its crew died or evacuated. And over the millennia that followed, geological processes buried it deeper and deeper, until it came to rest in the very structure that would later become the foundation of the Necron tomb. The Titan that the Canoptek Wraith now examines is a shadow of its former glory. Its void shield generators are dark and cold. Its plasma reactor, normally a miniature sun barely contained by magnetic fields and adamantium shielding, has long since gone cold. Its weapons, though still physically intact, are unpowered and unable to fire. Centuries of burial have taken their toll on the structure, with some external components corroded or compressed by the weight of stone above. But the core of the machine, protected by layers of adamantium armor and built to withstand punishment that would vaporize lesser vehicles, remains largely intact. The Titan sleeps, not in the active sense that the Necrons sleep, but in the passive silence of a machine powered down and abandoned. Yet within its armored shell, within the data cores and cogitator banks that constitute its machine spirit, information remains. The records of battles fought and enemies destroyed, the tactical protocols that guided its operations, the sacred oaths and prayers that its crew spoke as they went to war. And now, for the first time in millennia, something is paying attention to this fallen god engine, something ancient and powerful, with technology that makes even the sophisticated systems of the Titans seem primitive and crude. The Necrons have found this intruder in their tomb, and they are beginning to ask questions. What is this machine? What can we learn from it? What does its presence tell us about the younger races that now inhabit our galaxy? And most importantly, what should we do with it? How a Titan becomes entombed. The question of how a massive Imperial Titan could end up buried within a Necron tomb world requires us to understand the vast timescales involved and the layers of geological and historical events that must align for such an improbable situation to occur. This is not a simple matter of cause and effect, but rather a chain of unlikely events spanning thousands or even millions of years, each contributing to a final outcome that neither the Imperium nor the Necrons could have predicted. Let us begin with the world itself. Before the Necrons arrived, before humanity evolved on distant Terra, this world existed as an unremarkable planet in an unremarkable system. Perhaps it had native life, or perhaps it was a barren rock orbiting its star in silent indifference. The Necrontyr, in their expansion across the galaxy before the biotransference, identified this world as suitable for their purposes. Maybe it had strategic value, positioned along a major stellar route. Maybe it contained resources valuable to their civilization. Or maybe it was simply one of thousands of worlds they claimed because they could, because their empire demanded ever more territory to match the holdings of the old ones they so despised. When the decision was made to enter the Great Sleep, this world was selected as a tomb world. Necron architects and engineers descended upon it, beginning the monumental task of excavating the vast underground complexes that would house the sleeping dynasties. They dug deep, far deeper than any surface catastrophe could reach, into the bedrock that had existed for billions of years. They carved out chambers that could hold millions of Necrons in their sarcophagi. They installed the stasis technology, the dimensional stabilizers, the resurrection forges, all the systems needed to ensure the success of the Great Sleep. And then, when all was ready, the Necrons descended into their tomb and sealed it behind them, the surface entrances collapsing or hiding themselves behind holographic fields and dimensional barriers. For millions of years, the tomb lay undisturbed. The planet's surface underwent countless changes. Continents shifted as tectonic forces reshaped the crust. Seas rose and fell. Whatever atmosphere the planet once possessed might have changed dramatically, potentially stripped away by stellar winds or rebuilt through volcanic outgassing. Ice ages came and went. Asteroid impacts left craters that slowly eroded away. But beneath all this surface activity, deep in the stable bedrock, the tomb remained intact. its systems continuing their vigil over the sleeping Necrons. Then came humanity. During the dark age of technology, when humanity's first great expansion carried it to tens of thousands of worlds, this planet was rediscovered. Perhaps human colonists found it empty and claimed it for themselves. Perhaps they found ruins on the surface, remnants of the ancient Necrontier civilization, and mistakenly believed they had discovered merely another dead alien culture. They had no idea that beneath their feet, kilometers of solid rock separated them from a tomb world that could eradicate their entire colony within hours of awakening. They built their cities, established their farms and factories, and lived their lives in complete ignorance of the danger sleeping below. This human civilization likely flourished for centuries or even millennia during the height of the dark age of technology. They might have built impressive structures, tapped into the planet's resources, and established trade with other human worlds through the stable warp routes that existed during that golden age. But then came the age of strife, and everything collapsed. Cut off from other worlds by warp storms, this colony world would have had to fend for itself. Perhaps it survived for a time, its technology slowly degrading as the knowledge to maintain it was lost. Or perhaps it descended immediately into chaos, its inhabitants turning on each other in desperate wars for dwindling resources. When the Great Crusade reached this system, perhaps 10,000 years ago, what the Imperial forces found was a world in ruins. The human population might have regressed to pre-industrial levels, huddling in the remnants of ancient cities they no longer understood. Or perhaps the planet had been claimed by Xenos species, forcing the Imperium to mount a military campaign to reclaim it for humanity. Whatever the situation, the Imperium deployed forces to secure the world, and among those forces was a Titan legion, bringing god engines to establish Imperial dominance beyond any possibility of challenge. We can imagine the battle that led to Eternal Vigilance's fall. Perhaps it was fighting against an orc horde that had claimed the planet, the Titan's weapons cutting through crude gargants and mobs of greenskins. Perhaps it faced a chaos incursion, standing against demon engines and corrupted war machines while chanting prayers to the machine god. Or perhaps the threat was something else entirely, a Xenos species now extinct or forgotten, but which possessed weapons capable of threatening even a Titan. Whatever the enemy, the battle was fierce enough to bring down a Reaver-class Titan, a feat that requires either overwhelming force or extraordinarily bad luck. Let us imagine the moment of Eternal Vigilance's fall. The battle has raged for hours, or perhaps days. The Titan's void shields have been battered down by concentrated enemy fire. Its armor, thick adamantium plate that can shrug off hits that would vaporize tanks, has been breached in several places. Warning klaxons blare throughout the cathedral-like interior as the Princeps and his crew struggle to maintain control of the God Engine's systems. Then comes the critical hit, a lance strike from orbit or a massive explosion that damages the plasma reactor's containment field. The Princeps has mere seconds to make a decision: evacuate the crew or stay and try to initiate emergency shutdown. Perhaps the Princeps chooses to stay, believing he can save his God Engine. Or perhaps the damage is so catastrophic that evacuation is impossible. The plasma reactor goes critical. But instead of the catastrophic detonation that would normally occur, something interferes with the explosion. Perhaps the emergency containment systems activate, channeling the excess energy into the ground. Perhaps the peculiar geology of the area, influenced by the dimensional technologies in the Necron tomb below, affects how the plasma disperses. Or perhaps it is simply luck, good or bad, depending on perspective. The Titan does not explode. Instead, it collapses, its leg servos failing, its massive weight causing it to crash to the ground with earth-shaking force. The impact is tremendous. Eternal Vigilance weighs thousands of tons, and when it falls, it does not simply lie on the surface. The ground beneath it, already weakened by the battle, and possibly by geological instabilities related to the tomb complex below, gives way. The Titan begins to sink, not slowly over years, but in a matter of minutes or hours, dragged down by its own weight into a widening crater. Perhaps this area was already geologically unstable, a weak point where the ceiling of the tomb complex was closer to the surface than usual. Perhaps the battle itself had triggered fault lines or created structural weaknesses. Whatever the cause, eternal vigilance continues to sink, buried beneath cascading tons of rock and soil. The immediate aftermath of the battle would have been chaotic. Imperial forces, if victorious, would have tried to recover the fallen Titan, but the sheer scale of the geological event makes this impossible. The crater continues to collapse, making any approach deadly. Rescue teams that attempt to reach the Titan find themselves facing cave-ins and shifting ground that threaten to bury them as well. After several failed attempts, and possibly some casualties, the decision is made to abandon the recovery effort. The Titan is listed as lost, its princeps and crew declared dead, their names added to the rolls of martyrs who died in service to the Imperium. The Legion mourns its loss, but eventually moves on, for there are always more battles to fight. Over the years and centuries that follow, the crater fills with sediment. Rain washes soil and rock into the depression. Vegetation, if the planet has any, begins to reclaim the area. Eventually, no surface indication remains that anything unusual ever occurred here. The records of the battle fade, preserved in archives that few will ever access. The Titan becomes a forgotten casualty of a forgotten war, one of millions of such losses across the Imperium's long history. Only the Adeptus Mechanicus maintains detailed records of the Titan's loss, and even those eventually become corrupted or lost as data systems fail and archives are damaged by the passage of time. But deep beneath the surface, geological processes continue. The rock and soil that buried eternal vigilance gradually compact under pressure, becoming solid stone. Over thousands of years, the Titan is encased in a tomb of rock, sealed away from the outside world. And all the while, it continues to sink, pushed downward by the weight of material above, and pulled by the vagaries of geological processes that operate on timescales incomprehensible to human minds. Fault lines shift, strata compress and deform, and slowly, impossibly, the Titan descends toward the level where the Necron tomb complex exists. The moment when the Titan's tomb intersects with the upper defensive layers of the Necron tomb complex is subtle. There is no dramatic breach, no sudden collision. Instead, over years or decades, the rock surrounding the Titan gradually intrudes into spaces that the Necron architects had left as part of their defensive design. The outer defensive perimeter of a Necron tomb is not a solid wall, but rather a series of layers designed to deflect and absorb attacks. Some of these layers are chambers filled with inert materials, buffers meant to dissipate energy from orbital bombardments or seismic events. When the geological processes push the Titan's burial chamber into contact with these spaces, the rock flows gradually, filling voids and creating new connections. The Canoptech constructs, patrolling their eternal rounds through the tomb's corridors, notice the intrusion almost immediately. To them, it appears as an anomaly in the tomb's structure, an unexpected change in density and material composition in an area that should be stable and unchanging. At first, it is treated as a natural geological event, something that requires monitoring but not immediate action. The scarabs begin to investigate, cutting into the intruding rock to assess its composition and determine whether it poses any threat to the tomb's deeper systems. This is when they encounter the Titan. The first scarabs to reach eternal vigilance do not understand what they have found. Their sensors detect metal, which is not unusual in geological formations. But this metal is arranged in patterns that are clearly artificial, and it registers materials that do not match anything in the Necron database of naturally occurring substances. The scarabs report their findings, and the tomb's systems escalate the response. Canoptech spiders arrive to conduct more detailed analysis. And finally, a Canoptech wraith phases through the stone to get a direct look at whatever has intruded into the tomb's boundary. What the wraith sees is unprecedented in the tomb's millions of years of dormancy. Not an attacking force attempting to breach the tomb's defenses, not a natural geological formation causing structural stress, but a massive machine, obviously created by intelligent beings, sitting silently in what has become a cavity in the tomb's outer defensive perimeter. The machine is damaged and inactive, showing no signs of power or operation. But its very presence raises questions that the tomb's systems are not equipped to answer through their standard protocols. And so the Wraith transmits its findings back to the master program, including detailed scans of the Titan and the surrounding area. The data is analyzed, compared against every record in the tomb's databases. No match is found. This machine represents technology that did not exist when the Necrons entered the Great Sleep. It is clearly a weapon of war, built by a civilization that the Necrons have no records of encountering, and it sits within the tomb's defensive perimeter, its presence impossible to ignore and potentially dangerous if it were somehow to activate. Deep within the tomb, where the true masters sleep, the first stirrings of conscious thought begin to emerge. The master program, following protocols that have not been tested in millions of years, begins the process of awakening the tomb's nobility. Not a full awakening, not yet, but a gradual restoration of consciousness to those individuals whose authority and intelligence will be needed to assess this unprecedented situation. In their sarcophagi, the Necron lords and cryptechs begin the slow process of reactivation, their artificial minds booting up after an eternity of dormancy, preparing to confront a mystery that challenges everything they understood about their galaxy. First detection, Canoptech Guardians stir. The Canoptech Wraith's initial scan of the Titan takes approximately 3.7 seconds, though in the subjective experience of the construct's advanced processing systems, this represents hours of detailed analysis and comparison. Every surface is mapped with precision, measured in angstroms. Every material is identified through spectroscopic analysis. Every structural element is assessed for composition, purpose, and threat potential. And with each passing microsecond, the Wraith's decision matrices are calculating the implications of what it has found. The first thing the Wraith determines is that the object is undeniably artificial. The patterns are too regular, the materials too refined, the construction too purposeful to be anything but the work of intelligent beings. This immediately categorizes the object as a potential threat, triggering protocols that have waited millions of years for activation. The Wraith's sensors sweep the Titan again, this time searching for any sign of active power systems or hostile intent. It finds neither. The machine is cold, its systems offline, its weapons silent. But the absence of immediate danger does not erase the fundamental question. What is this thing, and how did it come to be here? The Wraith transmits its initial findings through the tomb's dimensional communication network, a system that operates outside normal space-time and allows instantaneous communication throughout the complex, regardless of physical barriers. The data streams to the Deep Spirit Master Program, the artificial intelligence that governs all of the tomb's autonomous functions. This program is sophisticated beyond anything the Imperium could create. A sentient artificial intelligence that has maintained the tomb for millions of years without error or deviation. It receives the Wraith's report and immediately begins its own analysis. The Master Program's first response is to deploy additional Canoptech constructs to the site. Within minutes, a swarm of several hundred Canoptech scarabs converges on the location, their tiny forms phasing through solid stone as easily as the Wraith. They crawl over every surface of the Titan, their mandibles clicking as they sample materials and run their own diagnostic scans. These scarabs are not merely maintenance drones. They are sophisticated analytical tools, each one capable of breaking down materials at the molecular level and analyzing their composition with extraordinary precision. What the scarabs discover is fascinating. The Titan's armor is composed primarily of adamantium, a material the Necrons have records of, but which they did not expect to find in this galaxy anymore. The alloy is crude by Necron standards, its crystal structure showing imperfections and inconsistencies that no Necron-tier artificer would have tolerated. But it is undeniably effective. Layer upon layer of heavy metal designed to absorb and disperse impact energy. Beneath the armor are servos and actuators, made from materials that the Necrons do not recognize at all. Synthetic compounds that must have been developed long after the Great Sleep began. As the scarabs continue their investigation, a Canoptech spider arrives at the site. This larger construct is the foreman of the Canoptech swarms, a mobile fabricator and repair station that coordinates the activities of lesser constructs. The The spider's advanced sensors are capable of penetrating deeper into structures than the scarabs can achieve, using long-range scanners that can map internal configurations without requiring physical access. It positions itself near the Titan's torso section and begins a comprehensive internal scan. What the spider discovers is even more intriguing than what is visible on the surface. The internal structure of the Titan is a maze of corridors, chambers, and mechanical systems. There are spaces clearly designed for biological occupants, though they are empty now. There are massive reactors, currently cold, but showing signs of having contained enormous amounts of energy when active. There are weapon systems of extraordinary sophistication, guidance systems, and targeting arrays that suggest whoever built this machine possessed advanced understanding of ballistics and energy projection. And throughout it all, there are networks of data conduits and processing nodes, the remains of what must have been a sophisticated computer system. The spider attempts to interface with this computer system, extending a probe into one of the access ports it identifies. The attempt fails immediately. The protocols are completely alien, operating on principles that have no equivalence in Necron technology. The data structures are incomprehensible, stored in formats that require translation layers the spider does not possess. Even the basic electrical protocols are different, using voltages and signal patterns that the spider's interface systems cannot interpret. This is not merely foreign technology. It is technology developed by a completely different civilization with its own unique evolutionary path and design philosophy. While the Canoptech constructs continue their physical analysis, the tomb's master program is conducting research of a different kind. It begins reviewing the tomb's historical records, searching for any mention of machines like this one or civilizations capable of building them. The records are vast, encompassing millions of years of Necrontyr and Necron history, but the master program can search them with inhuman speed and precision. Within seconds, it has reviewed every major military encounter, every first contact with an alien species, every technological innovation recorded by the tomb's inhabitants. The search comes up empty. There is nothing in the records that matches this technology, no civilization the Necrons encountered during their rise, during the War in Heaven, or during their later expansion across the galaxy, built machines like this. The master program expands its search to include theoretical constructions, hypothetical designs that Necrontyr engineers had proposed but never built. Still, nothing. Whatever this machine is, whatever civilization built it, they are completely unknown to the Necron database. This absence of information is significant. The master program understands, in its artificial way, that this means the machine was built after the Great Sleep began. It represents technology from the current era, from the galaxy as it exists now rather than the galaxy the Necrons knew 60 million years ago. This has profound implications. If younger races have developed technology sophisticated enough to build war machines on this scale, then the strategic calculus of awakening has changed. The galaxy is not merely occupied by upstart species using crude tools. It is populated by civilizations with significant military and technological capability. The master program makes its first critical decision. This situation requires analysis by higher intelligence than the Canoptech constructs can provide. It begins activating the reanimation sequence for one of the tomb's cryptechs, the scientist lords whose specialty is the analysis and understanding of technology. The chosen cryptech is one whose records indicate particular expertise in xenoarchaeology and the study of alien technologies. His name, in the Necron language, translates roughly as "he who uncovers secrets," though his original Necrontyr name has been lost to history. The reanimation process begins with the influx of power to the cryptech's sarcophagus. Within the ornate containment vessel, systems that have been dormant for millions of years begin to activate. Slowly, incrementally, the energy levels build. The living metal that composes the cryptech's body begins to warm, responding to the power flowing through it. Neural circuits that have been inactive for epochs start to process information again. And deep within the artificial consciousness that was once a Necrontyr scientist, awareness begins to return. The awakening is not instantaneous. It cannot be instantaneous. for the mind that is returning from such a long absence requires time to reassemble itself, to remember what it was before the sleep. The cryptech's first conscious thought is confusion, a sense of dislocation that comes from the vast gulf of time that has passed. He was a scientist on the world called Carnatash, studying the properties of living metal and contemplating ways to improve the efficiency of resurrection protocols. And then, in what feels like a single moment of discontinuity, he is awakening to find that everything has changed. The master program feeds information directly into the cryptech's consciousness as he awakens, bringing him up to date on the situation. There has been an intrusion into the tomb's boundaries. An unknown machine, clearly of alien origin, has been discovered in the outer defensive perimeter. Initial analysis suggests it is a weapon system of considerable sophistication. The master program requires expert assessment to determine the appropriate response. The cryptech's mind, still sluggish from the long sleep, processes this information and begins to formulate questions. What kind of weapon? What civilization built it? What threat does it pose? The sarcophagus opens, its heavy lid sliding aside with a hiss of escaping gas. The cryptech rises, his artificial body moving with mechanical precision despite the lingering disorientation in his mind. He is a tall figure, even by Necron standards, his body adorned with modifications that mark his status as a scientist rather than a warrior. Extra limbs extend from his torso, each tipped with specialized tools and sensors. His skull-like face holds ocular sensors more sophisticated than those of ordinary Necrons, capable of perceiving across a broader spectrum of wavelengths. And embedded in his chest is a dimensional stabilizer, a device that allows him to phase partially out of sync with normal space-time, a useful feature when working with particularly dangerous technologies. The cryptech moves through the tomb's corridors with purpose, following the path the master program has designated. Canoptech scarabs swarm around him, serving as both guide and honor guard. As he walks, he queries the master program for additional information. How long has the tomb been dormant? The answer stuns him, even through his artificial nature's emotional dampening. Approximately 60 million years, give or take a few million years of uncertainty. What is the current state of the galaxy? The answer is unknown, though the presence of this alien machine suggests significant changes have occurred. Are there any other signs of activity on the surface? The answer is negative, though surveillance has been limited to passive sensor monitoring. When the cryptech arrives at the location where the Titan has been discovered, he stops and simply observes for several long moments. The sight before him is extraordinary. The machine is huge, far larger than anything the Necrons would typically consider practical for an individual war unit. The Necron military philosophy has always favored swarms of smaller units over single massive ones, believing that distributed force provides more tactical flexibility than concentrated power. But clearly, whoever built this machine thought differently. The cryptech approaches slowly, his enhanced sensors conducting their own analysis. He can see things the Canoptech constructs could not, perceiving subtle patterns in the machine's construction that speak to the design philosophy of its creators. This is not merely a weapon, it is a religious artifact. He can see it in the ornate details, the decorative elements that serve no functional purpose but which clearly hold symbolic meaning. The machine's torso structure resembles a temple or cathedral, complete with architectural elements that echo religious buildings. There are inscriptions on the armor plating, text in a language the cryptech does not recognize, but which is clearly intended to invoke some form of spiritual protection or blessing. This observation alone tells the cryptech much about the civilization that built this machine. They were not purely pragmatic in their technology. They imbued their creations with meaning beyond mere function. They believed, or wanted to believe, that their machines were more than tools, that they were manifestations of something greater. This is simultaneously sophisticated and primitive, showing advanced technological capability combined with what the cryptech would consider superstitious thinking. But it is also potentially dangerous, because cultures that treat their weapons as holy relics tend to be deeply committed to their use. The cryptech extends one of his auxiliary limbs, touching the Titan's armor with specialized sensors. He can feel the echo of energy that once flowed through this machine, the residual signatures of a power system far more robust than anything he expected from a younger race. The reactor that powered this machine must have generated energy output comparable to a small star, contained and controlled through technologies that, while crude by Necron standards, are nonetheless impressively effective. Whoever built this did not simply stumble upon the principles of plasma containment. They mastered them well enough to create something that could operate reliably in combat conditions. As the cryptech continues his examination, his mind is already formulating hypotheses and theories. This machine represents a data point, a single example of what the younger races have achieved in the 60 million years since the Great Sleep began. If this is typical of their military technology, then the galaxy has changed far more than anyone could have predicted. The younger races are no longer primitive tribes huddling in caves and celebrating the discovery of fire. They are building weapons that rival the capabilities of Necron war machines, even if their understanding of the underlying principles is less sophisticated. The question is what to do with this information and with this machine. The cryptech understands that his analysis will inform decisions made by the tomb's leadership once they are fully awakened. Should the tomb view the younger races as serious threats that must be eliminated immediately, or are they potential resources, civilizations that could be subjugated and used to serve the dynasty's goals? The answer depends on understanding not just the capabilities represented by this machine, but the nature of the civilization that built it, their numbers, their spread across the galaxy, and their potential to interfere with the Necron plan for galactic reconquest. The cryptech signals to the master program that he requires more time to complete his analysis. He wants to study not just the physical structure of this machine, but its design philosophy, its operational principles, everything that can be learned about its creators from this single example. The master program acknowledges and assigns additional canoptech constructs to assist in the investigation. Scarabs begin carefully excavating around the Titan, clearing away the rock that has accumulated around it, while spiders set up temporary power generators and analysis stations. As this work proceeds, deep within the tomb, other reanimation sequences are beginning. The master program has determined that this situation requires more than just scientific analysis. It requires command decisions, strategic assessments, and ultimately, the attention of the tomb's true rulers. The awakening has begun, and it is proceeding according to protocols that were established millions of years ago. But the situation those protocols were designed to address has changed in ways the Necron architects could never have imagined. A younger race has not merely achieved civilization, they have achieved technological sophistication. And one of their war machines, purely by accident, has intruded into a space that no outsider should ever have reached. The question that the awakening Necrons will have to answer is not just what to do about this specific intrusion, it is how to respond to a galaxy that has evolved far beyond what they expected to find when they emerged from their long sleep. Awakening protocols engage. In the deepest chambers of the tomb world, Karnatash, in throne rooms carved from single pieces of living metal and decorated with battle honors that predate the rise of mammals on Terra, the true awakening begins. These chambers have been silent for 60 million years, their only activity, the slow pulse of stasis fields, maintaining the sarcophagi of the Necron nobility. But now, triggered by the discovery of the Titan, and the assessment that this situation requires command authority beyond what the tomb's automated systems can provide, the reanimation sequence escalates to its highest tier. The first of the nobility to awaken is a Necron lord named Ahmontek the Vigilant. His title reflects his role in the dynasty before the Great Sleep. He was the defender of the tomb's boundaries, responsible for ensuring that no threat could penetrate to the sleeping masters. That he is the first to be awakened is appropriate, for it is his domain that has been breached, his responsibility that has been called into question by the presence of the intruder. The master program has calculated that Ahmontek's expertise in security protocols and defensive strategy makes him the optimal choice to assess the situation and determine the appropriate response. Ahmontek's reanimation follows a sequence similar to that of the cryptech, but with additional protocols befitting his higher status. As power flows into his sarcophagus, his consciousness begins to reassemble itself from the fragmented state of deep stasis. But unlike the cryptek, whose mind was allowed to return gradually, Ahmontek's awakening is accelerated by priority commands from the master program. The situation requires immediate attention, and delay could prove dangerous. Within minutes rather than hours, Ahmontek's consciousness has fully reintegrated, his artificial mind processing the vast gulf of time that has passed and preparing to receive the situation briefing. But even as Ahmontek awakens, the master program makes another decision. The presence of unknown technology, the implications of younger races achieving sophistication, the potential for broader threats to the tomb's security, all of these factors combine to trigger additional awakening protocols. This is not a situation that can be resolved by a single lord and a cryptek. This requires the attention of the tomb's supreme authority, the being who bears the title of Pharaon and commands the dynasty itself. The Pharaon of Karnatash is named Sarith, the Eternal Seeker, and his awakening is an event of profound significance. Where lesser Necrons might be awakened with simple power influxes and basic consciousness restoration, the Pharaon's reanimation requires elaborate protocols that touch upon systems throughout the entire tomb. As his sarcophagus begins to activate, power relays throughout the complex route additional energy to his chamber. The tomb's defensive systems automatically elevate their alert status. Communication arrays begin extending toward the surface, preparing to establish contact with other Necron forces should the Pharaon require it. Every system in the tomb recognizes that the Master is awakening, and they prepare themselves to serve. Sareth's consciousness returns like the dawn breaking over a world that has known only night. For 60 million years, he has been absent from reality, his mind held in a state where time has no meaning, and existence is reduced to potential rather than actuality. But now he is returning, his awareness expanding to fill the artificial neural networks that constitute his consciousness. And with that awareness comes memory, flooding back in waves that would overwhelm an organic mind, but which his Necron consciousness processes with mechanical efficiency. He remembers the decision to sleep. He remembers standing in this very chamber, addressing the nobility and warriors of his dynasty, explaining that the galaxy they had known was ending, and that a new era awaited them beyond the long night of dormancy. He remembers the doubts, the questions, the fears that even the biotransference could not entirely eliminate. What if something went wrong? What if they awakened to find the galaxy overrun by enemies? What if the stasis systems failed and they never awakened at all? He had answered those concerns with confidence he only partially felt, assuring his people that the Necron dynasties had survived worse and that they would endure through whatever trials the future held. And now, after what his chronometer informs him is approximately 60 million years, he is awakening to face the reality of that future. The master program immediately begins feeding him information, understanding that a Pharaon requires comprehensive briefings to make informed decisions. He learns of the length of the Great Sleep, far longer than originally intended, but not outside the parameters the system was designed to handle. He learns that the tomb's systems have functioned reliably, with acceptable levels of degradation and no catastrophic failures. He learns that the surface world has undergone dramatic changes, with evidence of multiple civilizations rising and falling in the time the Necrons slept. And he learns of the intruder, the massive war machine discovered in the tomb's outer defensive perimeter. The master program presents him with all the data collected thus far, the scans and analyses performed by the Canoptek constructs and reviewed by the cryptek. Sareth reviews this information with the practiced eye of a military strategist who has commanded campaigns across dozens of worlds. He sees immediately what his underlings have already concluded. This is not a primitive artifact. This is sophisticated military hardware, built by a civilization with significant technological capability. As Shareth's sarcophagus opens, and he steps out into his throne room for the first time in millions of years, he is already formulating his approach to this situation. He signals for Ahmontek and the cryptek to attend him, and within minutes they arrive, moving through the tomb's corridors with practiced efficiency. They find their Pharaon standing before his throne, a massive structure of living metal that serves both as a seat of authority and as an interface with the tomb's command systems. Sareth does not look like an entity that has been dormant for millions of years. His body is magnificent, crafted by the finest artificers the Necron race produced. Decorated with the honors and symbols of his rank, he radiates authority in a way that transcends his physical form, a presence that makes even other Necrons recognize him as their superior. The meeting that follows is brief and efficient, conducted with the precision that characterizes all Necron decision-making processes. Ahmontek presents his assessment of the security implications, noting that while the Titan represents no immediate threat, its presence indicates that the tomb's concealment may be less effective than hoped. If one piece of surface technology has penetrated to this level, others might follow, either through similar geological accidents or through deliberate exploration by the younger races. The tomb's defensive perimeter needs to be reassessed and potentially reinforced. The cryptech presents his preliminary scientific findings, noting the sophistication of the Titan's construction and the implications for whoever built it. He has not yet been able to access the Titan's computer systems, but he is confident that given time and resources, he can develop translation protocols that will allow him to extract information from whatever data storage remains intact. This information could prove invaluable in understanding the younger races and determining how best to approach them once the dynasty begins its campaigns of reconquest. Sareth listens to both presentations without interruption, his consciousness processing the information and comparing it against strategic models and historical precedents stored in his memory. When his subordinates finish speaking, he remains silent for several long moments, considering. Then he speaks, his voice emanating from vocalizers built into his artificial body, carrying the weight of authority that comes from millions of years of leadership. This discovery presents us with an unexpected opportunity. Sareth begins. We awakened, expecting to find the galaxy populated by primitive species, little more than animals competing over scraps of worlds we once ruled. Instead, we find evidence that at least one younger race has achieved significant technological capability. This changes our strategic calculations, but it also provides us with intelligence we would otherwise have to gather through lengthy campaigns and observations. He gestures toward the data displays, showing the Titan's structure. This machine is a gift, though its builders did not intend it as such. It represents a comprehensive example of their military technology, their design philosophy, their manufacturing capabilities, and potentially their tactical doctrines. By studying it, we can learn what we will face when we emerge to reclaim our territory. We can identify weaknesses to exploit and strengths to avoid or counter, and most importantly, we can determine whether these younger races represent a significant threat to our goals or merely a complication to be managed. Ahmontek responds immediately, his tactical mind recognizing the wisdom in this approach. Then you wish to proceed with detailed analysis rather than immediate elimination of the intrusion. Yes, Sareth confirms, but we must do so intelligently. The cryptech will continue his studies, but with additional resources and priority access to the tomb's analytical systems. I want to know everything this machine can tell us about its builders, their technological limitations, their material constraints, their energy generation capabilities, everything. And I want comparative analyses against our own technology, identifying areas where they might pose unexpected challenges. He turns to the cryptech. How long will you require to extract meaningful data from this machine's computer systems? The cryptech considers before responding. If the systems are intact, and if my assumptions about their data storage methods are correct, I estimate no more than several solar cycles to develop working translation protocols. Extracting and analyzing the data itself will take longer, perhaps several stellar rotations, depending on volume and complexity. Sareth nods, satisfied. Acceptable. Begin immediately. Requisition whatever canoptech resources you require, and inform me of any significant findings as they emerge. Ahmontek, I want you to oversee security during this investigation. If this machine's creators are aware of its location and mount a recovery effort, I want us prepared to respond appropriately. Deploy additional defensive constructs to the area and ensure our sensor arrays are monitoring for any surface activity that might indicate incoming threats. Both subordinates acknowledge their orders and prepare to depart, but Sareth raises a hand to stop them. One more thing. This situation has demonstrated that our understanding of the current galactic state is severely limited. We cannot make informed strategic decisions based on a single data point. I am ordering a gradual expansion of our awakening protocols. Bring online our reconnaissance units and deploy them to the surface. I want comprehensive surveys of this world and preliminary surveys of the surrounding star systems. We need to understand what the galaxy has become in our absence before we can determine how best to reclaim our place within it. This order has significant implications. A gradual expansion of awakening means more Necrons being brought online, more systems being activated, more resources being consumed. It is a commitment to full awakening, a recognition that the situation requires more than just isolated investigation. Sareth is effectively declaring that the Great Sleep is ending for the dynasty of Karnatash, not all at once, but through a controlled escalation that will see the entire tomb gradually coming to life over the following weeks and months. As Ahmontek and the Cryptek depart to carry out their orders, Sareth returns his attention to the displays showing the Titan. There is something almost ironic about this situation, he reflects. The Necrons buried themselves to wait for the galaxy to become ready for their return. And now, one of the first signs they encounter upon awakening is a war machine from a younger race, inadvertently buried in a tomb of its own, waiting to be discovered. Two different civilizations, two different methods of warfare, brought together by the random chance of geological processes and the vast sweep of time. But Shereth is old enough and wise enough to know that there is no such thing as pure chance. Everything happens for a reason, even if that reason is simply the mathematical probabilities of an uncaring universe. The Titan is here because forces beyond anyone's control put it here. And the Necrons are discovering it now because their awakening protocols triggered at this particular moment, rather than a million years earlier or later. Whether this convergence will prove fortunate or disastrous remains to be seen. But Shereth is determined that his dynasty will learn everything possible from this unexpected gift before deciding how to proceed. He issues additional commands to the master program, ordering it to continue monitoring the situation and to alert him immediately if any changes occur. Then he begins the process of reviewing the tomb's complete status, assessing which systems have degraded over the long sleep and which require immediate attention. There is much work to be done, many preparations to make before the dynasty can emerge to confront the galaxy beyond. But for now, in this moment, the focus is on understanding what that galaxy has become. And the key to that understanding lies in the massive war machine that geological chance has delivered into Necron hands. Necron assessment and analysis. The Cryptek's laboratory, hastily established in a chamber adjacent to where the Titan has been discovered, hums with activity that would be imperceptible to human senses, but which fills the Necron frequency ranges with complex patterns of energy and information exchange. Canoptek scarabs move in coordinated swarms, their tiny bodies glowing with the emerald light of active processing. Canoptek spiders stand at various stations, their multiple limbs manipulating tools and sensors with precision measured in nanometers. And at the center of it all, the Cryptek himself works at his analysis, his consciousness simultaneously managing dozens of different investigations, while his physical form remains focused on the most critical task, breaking into the Titan's computer systems. The challenge is more complex than the Cryptek initially anticipated. It is not simply a matter of incompatible protocols or unfamiliar data structures. The computer systems of the Titan are designed with multiple layers of security and encryption, protections meant to prevent enemy forces from accessing sensitive information if a Titan is captured. The machine spirits of the Adeptus Mechanicus, while not truly intelligent by Necron standards, are nonetheless sophisticated enough to recognize unauthorized access attempts and respond with countermeasures. And even though the Titan has been offline for millennia, these passive defenses remain in place, like the locked doors of an abandoned fortress. But the Cryptek is patient, and he has advantages that the Titan's designers never anticipated. Where a human tech priest might spend years trying to decode the encryption through conventional means, the Cryptek can apply computational power that makes even the most sophisticated Imperial cogitators seem like abacuses by comparison. He analyzes the patterns of data flow in the circuits he can access, identifying the mathematical principles that govern their encryption. He examines the physical structure of the storage media, understanding how information is recorded at the molecular level. And slowly, methodically, he begins to build translation systems that can convert the Titan's data into formats his Necron consciousness can comprehend. The first breakthrough comes after approximately 72 hours of continuous work. The cryptech manages to access what appears to be a basic diagnostic log, a record of the Titan's final moments before its systems went offline. The data is fragmentary and corrupted, damaged by millennia of storage without power, and by whatever catastrophic event caused the Titan to fall in the first place. But even these fragments tell a story. The cryptech can see the cascading failures that led to the Titan's demise. First, there is a record of void shield overload, multiple impacts overwhelming the defensive energy fields faster than they could regenerate. Then comes damage to the primary cooling systems, causing temperatures in the plasma reactor to spike beyond safe parameters. The Princeps activated emergency protocols, trying desperately to bring the reactor under control while maintaining combat capability. But the damage was too severe, the failures cascading too quickly. The final entry in the log is a shutdown command, the Princeps ordering an emergency scram of the reactor in a last desperate attempt to prevent a catastrophic detonation. This information fascinates the cryptech for multiple reasons. First, it confirms that the Titan was brought down in combat, not by mechanical failure or accident. Whatever enemy it faced was capable of overwhelming even the substantial defenses of a Reaver-class Titan. Second, it shows that the Titan's operators were willing to abandon the machine rather than risk its destruction. This suggests a culture that values preservation over glory, practicality over honor. And third, the sophistication of the emergency protocols indicates a deep understanding of the dangers inherent in the Titan's power systems. But the diagnostic log is just the beginning. As the cryptech's translation protocols improve, he begins accessing more substantial data archives. He finds technical specifications, blueprints, and maintenance records that detail every aspect of the Titan's construction. He finds tactical databases, battle logs from engagements across dozens of worlds against enemies ranging from orcs to heretic Astartes. And most importantly, he finds cultural information, prayers and catechisms, and oath records that provide insight into the beliefs and values of the Titan's crew. The cryptech compiles this information into a comprehensive report for Faerun Sareth, organizing it according to strategic relevance and potential impact on the dynasty's plans. The report begins with technical assessments, comparing the Titan's capabilities against equivalent Necron war machines. The conclusion is complex. In terms of raw firepower, a Reaver-class Titan is roughly equivalent to a formation of 3 Necron monoliths working in coordination. Its void shields provide defense comparable to a Necron quantum shielding array. Its plasma reactor generates power output similar to multiple Necron power nodes. But the comparison is not straightforward, because the two technologies approach warfare from fundamentally different philosophical positions. Imperial Titans are concentrated force multipliers, single units that pack enormous capability into a mobile platform. They are expensive to build and difficult to replace, but they can dominate a battlefield through their mere presence. Necron forces, by contrast, favor distributed systems, preferring swarms of smaller units that can be replaced easily and which present enemies with multiple targets requiring different tactical responses. Neither approach is inherently superior. They simply reflect different strategic doctrines, born from different historical experiences. What troubles the cryptech more than the raw capabilities is the sophistication demonstrated in the Titan's construction. This is not primitive technology cobbled together by beings who stumbled upon scientific principles by accident. This represents a mature industrial civilization with deep understanding of materials science, energy, physics, and systems engineering. The humans, if that is indeed what the Titan's builders are called, have achieved a level of technological sophistication that allows them to compete on the same battlefield as Necron forces, even if their tools are less elegant and their understanding less fundamental. The cultural information provides additional context that shapes the cryptech's assessment. The prayers and rituals recorded in the Titan's databanks reveal a civilization deeply committed to religious beliefs centered around what they call the machine god. They view their technology not as tools to be used and discarded, but as sacred objects imbued with spiritual significance. This has both advantages and limitations. On one hand, it breeds fanatical devotion and willingness to sacrifice in defense of their machines. On the other hand, it creates rigidity in thinking. A reluctance to modify or adapt when doing so might be seen as defiling the sacred. The battle logs provide tactical intelligence that Faron Sareth will find particularly valuable. The cryptech can see how Titans operate in combat, how they coordinate with other forces, what tactics they favor, and which situations they find challenging. He learns that Titans typically operate as part of larger formations, supported by infantry and armor that can exploit breaches the Titans create. He learns that they rely heavily on their void shields for defense, making them vulnerable to weapons that bypass shields or overwhelm them through sustained fire. And he learns that Titan crews have strict hierarchies and protocols, suggesting that disrupting their command structures could lead to tactical confusion and degraded performance. But perhaps the most concerning revelation comes from the identification of the specific organization this Titan belonged to. The heraldry markings identify it as Eternal Vigilance of Legio Metallica, a Titan legion that the data logs suggest has existed for at least 10,000 years. This means the humans have maintained continuous military traditions across that time span, preserving knowledge and organizational structures through what must have been countless changes of personnel. It suggests a civilization with significant stability and resources, capable of sustaining military forces over timescales that dwarf the histories of most younger races. The cryptech takes all of this information and synthesizes it into strategic recommendations. He suggests that the humans represent a legitimate military threat that cannot be dismissed or underestimated. Their technology, while less sophisticated than Necron equivalents, is sufficient to contest control of worlds and potentially to damage Necron forces if they are allowed to mass in sufficient numbers. However, he also identifies potential weaknesses. The humans' religious devotion to their technology creates predictable behavior patterns. Their reliance on concentrated force multipliers like Titans means that eliminating or disabling these key units can cause disproportionate impact on their tactical effectiveness, and their apparent lack of access to advanced dimensional or temporal technologies means they are vulnerable to Necron strategic assets like dolmen, gates, and chronometric weapons. The most important recommendation in the cryptech's report is for caution. He advises against immediate aggressive action to reclaim territory. Instead, he suggests a phased approach. Gather more intelligence about the current state of the galaxy, identify the locations and strengths of potential enemies, and prepare the dynasty's forces thoroughly before beginning overt campaigns of reconquest. The humans and other younger races have had 60 million years to spread across the galaxy. They will not be dislodged quickly or easily, and premature action could alert them to the Necron presence before the dynasty is ready for full-scale warfare. When Faron Sareth reviews this report, he finds himself in agreement with most of the cryptech's conclusions. The discovery of the Titan has provided exactly the kind of intelligence he hoped for, confirmation that the younger races have achieved more than expected, but also evidence that they are not so advanced as to be unstoppable. The challenge will be managing the dynasty's awakening carefully, bringing online enough forces to defend the tomb world while gathering information and preparing for eventual expansion without triggering premature conflicts that could prove costly. Sareth convenes a council with his most senior subordinates, including Amontek and several other lords who have now been awakened to take up their roles in the dynasty's command structure. He presents them with the cryptech's findings and opens the discussion to strategic debate. What emerges is a consensus around several key points. First, the dynasty will continue its gradual awakening, but will prioritize reconnaissance and intelligence gathering over military mobilization. Second, the Titan itself will be preserved as a research asset, rather than being destroyed or scrapped. The cryptech will continue his studies, potentially even attempting to reverse engineer certain systems to better understand human technology. Third, The dynasty will establish covert observation posts on the surface and in the surrounding star systems, monitoring for human activity and gathering data on their current disposition and strength. But there is also debate about longer-term strategy. Some of the lords argue for aggressive expansion, claiming that the dynasty should strike now, while the humans are presumably unaware of the Necron presence. Others advocate for caution, pointing out that the Titan's presence suggests this world may be within human-claimed territory, meaning any overt action could draw unwanted attention. Sareth listens to both arguments before making his decision. The dynasty will prepare for eventual conflict, but it will not initiate hostilities until it has a clearer understanding of what it faces. This decision represents a pragmatic approach born from millions of years of strategic thinking. Sareth understands that the Necron race's greatest advantage is not their superior technology or their immortality, but their patience. They have already waited 60 million years. They can wait a few more decades or centuries if doing so means the difference between successful reconquest and costly warfare. The humans and other younger races are mortal, subject to the ravages of time and the inevitable decay of their civilizations. The Necrons are eternal, and they can afford to play the long game. As the council concludes, and the lords depart to carry out their assigned roles, Shareth remains in his throne room, contemplating the strange fortune that has brought this Titan into his tomb. In another context, under different circumstances, the presence of a human war machine in the heart of a Necron tomb world would be seen as an insult, a violation that demands immediate retribution. But Shareth is wise enough to see beyond such simplistic reactions. The Titan is not an insult, it is an opportunity to learn, to prepare, and to ensure that when the dynasty of Karnatash finally emerges to reclaim its place in the galaxy, it does so with full knowledge of what it faces. Strategic implications and responses. The discovery of the Titan and the intelligence gained from its analysis ripple through the awakening structures of the tomb world, influencing decisions at every level of the dynasty's hierarchy. What began as a simple anomaly detected by canoptech constructs has evolved into a pivotal moment that will shape the dynasty's approach to the galaxy for centuries to come. As more Necrons awaken and are briefed on the situation, the strategic implications become increasingly clear and increasingly complex. Lord Ahmontek, in his role as the tomb's defender, immediately begins reassessing the defensive parameters. The Titan's presence proves that the tomb's boundaries are not as inviolate as originally believed. If a massive war machine can end up within the defensive perimeter through geological accident, what else might penetrate through similar means? He orders comprehensive surveys of the tomb's entire structure, looking for other weak points where the long millennia might have created vulnerabilities. Canoptech spiders are dispatched to reinforce areas where the rock interfaces with the tomb's living metal structures, while scarabs work to shore up sections that show signs of stress or degradation. But Ahmontek's concerns extend beyond just the physical security of the tomb itself. If this world has seen human activity recent enough to leave a Titan behind, that suggests the planet may be within or near human-controlled space. This raises the possibility of discovery, either through routine surveys or through deliberate archaeological investigation. The humans might not know what lies beneath the surface now, but that could change at any moment. Ahmontek recommends to Pharaon Sareth that the dynasty should consider contingency plans for defending the tomb against potential human assault, even as they pursue their intelligence-gathering operations. These contingency plans take shape over the following weeks as more of the tomb's military forces are brought online. Necron warriors awakened by the thousands, taking up positions in the upper levels of the tomb complex, where they can respond quickly to any intrusion. Immortals, the elite infantry whose capabilities exceed those of basic warriors, are stationed at critical junctions and command nodes, and the tomb begins activating its heavier assets. The canoptech constructs that operate on scales large enough to threaten even massed human forces. Tomb stalkers, massive serpentine machines designed to hunt through underground spaces, begin their patrols through newly excavated tunnels that connect the tomb to various surface access points. Meanwhile, reconnaissance operations on the surface begin in earnest. Under cover of darkness and utilizing their advanced cloaking technologies, small groups of Necron warriors emerge from hidden entrances to survey the world above. What they find is a planet that bears little resemblance to the world the Necrons knew before the Great Sleep. The climate has changed dramatically, with ice caps extending far beyond their historical positions. The atmosphere shows signs of industrial contamination, though at levels that suggest human activity ceased decades or centuries ago. And there are ruins, scattered across the continents, the remnants of human settlements that rose and fell in the time since the Titan was lost. The most significant discovery comes from a survey team that investigates what appears to be an abandoned military installation approximately 200 kilometers from the tomb's location. The facility is in ruins, its structures collapsed or overgrown, its equipment corroded beyond recognition, but enough remains to tell a story. This was a forward operating base, probably established during whatever campaign brought Imperial forces to this world. The presence of landing pads large enough to accommodate significant aircraft, and the remains of defensive fortifications suggest this was no minor outpost, but a major military establishment. Further investigation reveals something even more interesting. The ruins contain a communications array, or at least, what remains of one. The array's equipment is too degraded to function, but its very presence proves that this world was, at some point, connected to a broader human communication network. This suggests that the world's current isolation may be a recent development, possibly the result of whatever conflict led to the base's abandonment. It also suggests that if human forces do return to this world, they will likely attempt to re-establish communications, which could provide the Necrons with an opportunity to monitor their transmissions and gather additional intelligence. Pharaon Sareth orders that several of these surface sites be monitored continuously, with Canoptech wraiths maintaining invisible vigils over locations that might attract human attention. If archaeological teams or survey expeditions arrive, the dynasty will know immediately and can decide how to respond. The preference is to remain undetected for as long as possible, but if detection becomes inevitable, Sareth wants the option of controlled first contact, where the dynasty can dictate the terms of any interaction rather than being forced to react to human initiatives. As these preparations proceed, the Cryptech continues his deep analysis of the Titan's systems. His latest findings reveal information about the broader human civilization that the Titans served. The data logs contain references to something called the Imperium of Man, a vast interstellar empire that apparently spans much of the galaxy. The logs speak of the Emperor, a figure who seems to occupy a position somewhere between military commander and divine being in human belief systems. And they reference countless worlds, millions of them, each contributing to the Imperium's strength in ways that suggest a civilization of truly staggering scale. This revelation has profound strategic implications. If the humans have indeed established an empire of such magnitude, then the Necron dynasties face a challenge far more significant than Sareth initially estimated. It is one thing to reclaim worlds from scattered primitive cultures that can be swept aside with minimal effort. It is quite another to contest control of the galaxy with a civilization that can potentially field billions of soldiers and millions of war machines. Even with their technological advantages, the Necrons will be severely outnumbered if they face the full might of this Imperium. Sareth convenes another council to discuss these findings. The debate that ensues is more heated than the previous discussions, with the Lords split between those who see the Imperium's size as a threat, requiring immediate preemptive action, and those who view it as an opportunity to exploit human infighting and disunity. The humans, the Cryptech notes, seem to be in a state of constant warfare, both with external enemies and with themselves. The data logs reference heretics and traitors, internal conflicts that tear apart whole sectors. This suggests a civilization that, while vast, may not be as unified or as strong as its sheer size would suggest. One of the Lords, Zarek the Relentless, proposes a strategy that gains considerable support among the Council. Rather than attempting to confront the Imperium directly, the dynasty should focus on securing its immediate region and establishing a strong defensive position. From this base, they can gradually expand their influence, claiming worlds that are weakly defended or disputed between human factions. They can also attempt to make contact with other Necron dynasties, coordinating their activities to present a unified front against the younger races. The ultimate goal would be not immediate reconquest of the entire galaxy, but the establishment of a secure Necron core territory from which long-term strategic planning can proceed. Sareth finds this proposal prudent and adopts it as the basis for the dynasty's operational strategy. The tomb world of Karnatash will become the center of a growing Necron presence in this region of space. Additional tomb worlds will be contacted and awakened if they can be located. Resources will be gathered from uninhabited systems to support the dynasty's growing needs, and intelligence on human activities will be continuously collected and analyzed, building a comprehensive picture of enemy dispositions and capabilities. But even as these plans take shape, Sareth remains focused on the immediate catalyst for all these developments, the Titan sitting in the tomb's outer chambers. He orders that the machine be carefully preserved, not just for its intelligence value, but as a reminder of the galaxy the Necrons have awakened to. It represents the reality they must face, a galaxy no longer theirs by right but one they must fight to reclaim, and it serves as a warning against overconfidence. The younger races may be inferior in technology and understanding, but they are not helpless, and they have achieved more than anyone sleeping in the Great Sleep could have imagined. The Cryptek is given permission to continue his studies indefinitely, with resources allocated to support whatever experiments or analyses he deems necessary. He has proposed several intriguing possibilities, including attempting to reverse engineer certain aspects of the Titan's technology. Not because Necron technology needs improvement, the Cryptek is quick to note, but because understanding how humans solve engineering problems can reveal weaknesses and vulnerabilities that the Necrons can exploit. If the dynasty knows exactly how human void shields function, for example, they can develop weapons specifically designed to overwhelm or bypass them. There is also discussion of what to do with the Titan in the longer term. Some suggest it should eventually be destroyed, eliminating any possibility that humans might discover it and use its location to track back to the tomb. Others propose using it as bait, intentionally allowing its discovery to lure human forces into carefully prepared ambushes. Still others suggest it might serve as a diplomatic gesture, something that could be returned to the Imperium as part of negotiations if the dynasty ever chooses to pursue contact rather than conflict. Sareth defers all these decisions to a later time. For now, the Titan will remain where it is, protected by the very tomb it inadvertently intruded upon, its secrets being slowly extracted by Necron science. It is a symbol of two very different approaches to warfare, two very different civilizations, brought together by the random chance of geological processes and the vast sweep of time. And it is a reminder that in a galaxy as old and as large as this one, even the most improbable events can have profound consequences. As the weeks turn to months and the tomb world continues its gradual awakening, the presence of the Titan becomes part of the dynasty's foundational narrative. New Necrons awakening from stasis are briefed on its discovery and shown the intelligence it has provided. It serves as an educational tool, a concrete example of what the dynasty will face as it emerges to reclaim its rightful place in the galaxy. And for Fair and Sareth, it serves as a constant reminder of the need for caution, for thorough preparation, and for the patient accumulation of advantages before committing to the long campaign ahead. The discovery of the Titan has changed everything, yet in another sense, it has changed nothing. The Necrons will still pursue their goal of galactic reconquest. They will still rely on their superior technology and their immortal patience, but they will do so with their eyes open, fully aware of the challenges they face and the sophistication of the enemies they must overcome. The element of surprise may be gone, the comforting certainty that the younger races would prove helpless, shattered. But in its place is something perhaps more valuable: knowledge, real and actionable knowledge about the galaxy as it exists now, not as it was remembered from 60 million years ago. And deep in the Cryptek's laboratory, work continues on unlocking the remaining secrets of the fallen god engine, each new discovery adding to the dynasty's understanding and strengthening their plans for the conflicts to come. Historical parallels and encounters. The situation unfolding on Carnatash is unprecedented in its specifics, but it is not entirely unique in the broader history of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Throughout the galaxy, across the millennia, there have been other encounters between Necrons and the war machines of younger races. Other moments, when ancient and modern technology collided in ways that shaped the course of wars and the fates of worlds. Understanding these precedents provides valuable context for appreciating the significance of the Titan's discovery and the potential consequences of the decisions the dynasty makes. One of the most famous historical parallels comes from the War for Damnos, a conflict that erupted when the world of Damnos, a mining colony of the Imperium, was discovered to be sitting atop a massive Necron tomb complex. The Necrons of the Damnos tomb, led by the powerful overlord Anrakir the Traveler, awakened to find their world overrun by human settlers who had built extensive industrial facilities that were literally mining into the upper levels of the tomb structure. The initial response was immediate and violent, with Necron warriors and immortals erupting from beneath the surface to slaughter the human colonists and drive them from what the Necrons considered rightfully theirs. The Imperial response involved deploying the Ultramarine Space Marines along with considerable Imperial Guard forces and, crucially, several Scout Titans from Legio Fortis. The battles that followed demonstrated both the capabilities and limitations of Imperial Titans when facing Necron forces. The Titans proved effective at long range, their heavy weapons capable of destroying Necron warriors and vehicles with relative ease. But when Necron forces closed to combat range or when they deployed their own heavy units like monoliths and obelisks, the advantage shifted. The Necrons' Gauss weapons, capable of flaying matter atom by atom, proved effective at wearing down Titan armor despite the void shields. And Necron reanimation protocols meant that even when the Imperials scored kills, the enemy forces could return to combat far more quickly than replacements could be brought up. The War for Damnos ultimately saw the Imperial forces driven off-world, a rare victory for the Necrons, and one that demonstrated their capability to contest control of worlds, even against determined Imperial resistance backed by Titan support. But the war also showed the costs of such conflicts. The Necrons lost thousands of warriors who could not be recovered for reanimation. The tomb complex itself suffered damage from orbital bombardment and ground assault that would take decades to fully repair. And most significantly, the war drew attention to Necron activity in the region, prompting increased Imperial patrols and eventually the return of even larger forces intent on finishing what the first campaign started. Another relevant precedent comes from the battles on Medusa 5, a world that became a focal point for conflicts involving multiple factions, including Necrons, Imperial forces, and various Xenos species. On Medusa 5, Imperial survey teams discovered what they initially believed to be ancient ruins of unknown provenance. Deeper investigation revealed these to be the upper structures of a Necron tomb world, triggering a race between various factions to claim the advanced technology they assumed must be hidden below. The Imperial forces deployed to secure the site included several Titan formations, believing that the sheer firepower represented by these god engines would be sufficient to dominate any opposition. What they encountered was a Necron defensive system that had been specifically designed to counter large-scale threats. The tomb's creators had anticipated the possibility of massive enemy war machines and had installed specialized weapons systems to address them. Pylon networks created null-field zones that could suppress void shields and warp-based technologies. Gauss flare arrays, thousands of individual weapons coordinated by a central targeting system, could focus fire on single targets with devastating effect. And most troublingly for the Imperial forces, the tomb's dimensional technologies allowed Necron units to teleport directly onto the battlefield, bypassing defensive lines and appearing in the midst of Imperial formations. The battles on Medusa 5 demonstrated that while Titans represented formidable assets, they were not invincible even against enemies who lacked direct to-tangent scale equivalents. The Imperial forces eventually withdrew from the world after suffering casualties that were deemed unacceptable for the potential gains, leaving the Necrons in control of their tomb. But the conflict provided valuable intelligence to both sides, with the Imperials learning about Necron capabilities they had not previously encountered, and the Necrons gaining direct combat experience against Titan formations. A third relevant historical example comes from the Orphean War, a massive conflict that erupted when Imperial forces attempted to cleanse a region of space that turned out to contain numerous Necron tomb worlds. This campaign saw extensive use of Titan legions, with the Imperium deploying Emperor-class Titans in an attempt to decisively break Necron resistance. The results were mixed. In open battlefield engagements, the Titans performed well, their massive firepower capable of destroying Necron formations before they could close to effective combat range. But in more complex terrain, particularly in urban environments or when fighting amidst the ruins of the tombs themselves, the Titans' advantages diminished. One particularly notable engagement saw an Imperator-class Titan brought down by a coordinated Necron assault that exploited the God Engine's relative immobility. Necron Wraiths and Lichguard, using their phase technologies to bypass the Titan's void shields, teleported directly onto the war machine's hull. They then used their weapons to systematically dismantle the Titan's external sensors and secondary armaments before breaching the hull and attacking the crew directly. By the time Imperial reinforcements could respond, the Titan was crippled, its princeps dead, and its systems irreparably damaged. The loss of the Emperor Titan represented a significant blow to Imperial morale and demonstrated that even the most powerful war machines were vulnerable to tactics that negated their advantages. But not all historical encounters between Necrons and Titans have ended in victory for one side or the other. There have been instances of cooperation, however temporary and grudging. During the Third War for Armageddon, when Orc Horde threatened to overwhelm the entire world, Necron forces from a nearby tomb complex entered the battle, apparently motivated by their own territorial claims to the planet. In the chaos of that massive conflict, Imperial Titans and Necron war machines sometimes found themselves fighting in parallel against common enemies, though neither side acknowledged any formal alliance or cooperation. These historical examples provide valuable context for understanding the situation on Carnotash. They demonstrate that encounters between Necrons and Titans are not theoretical exercises, but real events that have shaped the course of conflicts across the galaxy. They show that while Titans represent formidable military assets, they are not insurmountable obstacles for Necron forces equipped with the right technologies and tactics. And they illustrate that the outcomes of such encounters depend heavily on the specific circumstances, the terrain, the support forces available to each side, and the strategic objectives being pursued. For Faerun Sareth and his dynasty, these precedents offer both warnings and opportunities. The warnings are clear. Underestimating the Imperium's military capability would be foolish, and engaging in premature conflicts could lead to costly losses, even if ultimate victory is achievable. But the opportunities are equally apparent. By studying how other Necron forces have countered Titan threats, Carnotash's forces can prepare specifically for such encounters. By understanding the tactical doctrines that govern Titan deployment, they can develop strategies that exploit weaknesses and avoid strengths. And by learning from the mistakes of other dynasties, they can avoid the errors that led to unnecessary casualties or strategic setbacks. The Cryptek, in his ongoing analysis of Eternal Vigilance, makes extensive use of these historical records. He compares the Reaver-class Titan's specifications against the capabilities demonstrated by Titans in documented battles. He analyzes the tactical patterns shown in the battle logs against known Imperial doctrines, and he develops comprehensive threat assessments that take into account not just the individual capabilities of a Titan, but its role in broader Imperial military strategy. His goal is to ensure that when the dynasty eventually encounters active Imperial Titan forces, they will be fully prepared to counter them effectively. One particularly interesting insight emerges from comparing the Titans' design philosophy against Necron military thought. Imperial Titans represent a concentration of force, massive singular assets that can dominate through their sheer power, but which also present single points of failure. If you destroy a Titan, you eliminate not just a single unit, but a significant portion of the enemy's combat capability in that region. Necron forces, by contrast, are designed for resilience through redundancy. Losing individual Necron warriors is relatively inconsequential because they can be replaced quickly through resurrection protocols. Even losing larger assets like monoliths or obelisks, while significant, does not cripple the dynasty's overall capability, because these machines can be rebuilt given time and resources. This philosophical difference suggests tactical approaches that the dynasty might adopt. Rather than attempting to match Titans with equivalent Necron war machines in direct confrontation, it might be more effective to use swarm tactics, overwhelming a Titan with numbers while using specialized units to exploit specific vulnerabilities. Alternatively, the dynasty could focus on asymmetric warfare, using their superior mobility and dimensional technologies to strike at the support infrastructure that Titans require, rather than engaging the god engines directly. These considerations feed into the broader strategic planning that Sareth and his council undertake. The dynasty is developing a comprehensive doctrine for engaging Imperial forces, one that takes into account the various assets the Imperium can deploy and the different tactical situations that might arise. Titans are certainly a major consideration, but they are not the only one. The dynasty must also prepare for encounters with Space Marines, whose individual capabilities can rival those of Necron immortals. They must plan for massive Imperial Guard formations that can potentially overwhelm Necron forces through sheer numbers, and they must consider the possibility of facing the Adeptus Mechanicus directly, which would bring not just Titans, but also their own sophisticated technologies and understanding of war machines. As these plans develop and the dynasty continues its gradual awakening, the Titan remains a focal point for learning and preparation. It is studied not just as a curiosity or a piece of salvage, but as a training tool. Awakening Necron warriors are shown the Titan and taught about the capabilities it represents. Immortals and Lichguard receive detailed briefings on Titan vulnerabilities and recommended engagement protocols. The Cryptechs analyze every system, looking for ways that Necron technology might counter or neutralize Titan advantages. And the Lords and Overlords incorporate tangent-centered scenarios into their tactical simulations, ensuring that when the time comes for actual combat, their forces will be ready. The discovery of eternal vigilance has thus become more than just an unusual incident in the dynasty's awakening. It has become a catalyst for comprehensive military preparation, forcing the dynasty to confront the reality of the galaxy they must now fight to reclaim, and providing them with the knowledge and understanding they need to do so effectively. Conclusion. When ancient meets ancient. As we reach the end of this exploration of what happens when Necrons find a sleeping Titan in their tomb, it is worth reflecting on the deeper significance of such an encounter. On the surface, this is a story about two war machines, one organic and one mechanical, brought together by the random chances of geology and time. But at a deeper level, it is a story about civilizations, about the collision between ancient powers and younger races, about the complexities of a galaxy where countless species compete for survival and dominance. The Necrons represent a civilization that achieved heights of power unmatched by any current faction in the galaxy. They fought gods and won. They commanded technologies that could manipulate reality itself at the most fundamental levels. They created an empire that spanned the galaxy when humanity's ancestors were still primitive apes learning to use tools. And yet, despite all their power, they were forced to retreat into sleeping tombs, waiting for a future that might never come. Their awakening now confronts them with a galaxy utterly transformed, populated by races that did not exist in their time, and filled with technologies developed along completely different evolutionary paths. The Imperium of Man, represented by the Titan Eternal Vigilance, embodies a different kind of power. It is not the power of perfect understanding or absolute technological supremacy. It is the power of scale, of faith, of the ability to mobilize billions of humans in service to common goals. The Imperium achieves through brute force and sheer determination what it cannot accomplish through elegant solution or sophisticated understanding. Its Titans are perfect representations of this philosophy, massive and crude compared to Necron equivalents, but effective through their commitment to overwhelming force and unshakable belief in their divine purpose. The encounter between these two philosophies, these two approaches to warfare and civilization, encapsulates the larger conflicts that define the Warhammer 40,000 setting. Neither side is purely good or evil. Both have achieved remarkable things through their own unique paths, and both face existential threats that force them into conflicts neither might choose if given better alternatives. The Necrons fight to reclaim what they see as rightfully theirs, to restore an empire that was stolen from them by fate and betrayal. The Imperium fights to preserve human civilization against countless threats, to ensure that humanity has a future, even if that future must be built on mountains of corpses and oceans of blood. The specific situation on Carnatash demonstrates how these broader conflicts play out in individual cases. Pharaon Shereth could have chosen immediate violence, ordering the Titans' destruction and preparing for aggressive expansion to reclaim surrounding systems. This would have been consistent with Necron pride and the belief in their inherent superiority. But instead, he chose patience and intelligence gathering, recognizing that the galaxy has changed in ways that require careful study before action. This decision shows wisdom born from millions of years of experience, an understanding that power without knowledge is often worse than useless. Similarly, the Imperium's loss of the Titan demonstrates the costs of their approach to warfare. Eternal vigilance was a powerful asset, a god engine that had served for thousands of years. But when it fell, the resources to recover it were not available or were prioritized elsewhere. The Titan was abandoned, its crew's sacrifices forgotten in the grinding machinery of a military that fights on countless worlds simultaneously. This is the nature of the Imperium, an entity so vast that individual losses, even of irreplaceable assets, become statistical inevitabilities rather than personal tragedies. The question that remains as the dynasty of Carnatash continues its awakening is what will happen when these forces meet openly, rather than through the intermediary of a buried relic. Will the Necrons and the Imperium find themselves locked in total war, each attempting to annihilate the other in conflicts that could consume entire sectors? Or will they find ways to coexist, perhaps even to cooperate against threats that endanger both their species? The history of the setting suggests the former is far more likely than the latter, but the specifics will depend on the choices made by individuals on both sides. For now, on Carnatash, the Titan sleeps in its new tomb, preserved and studied by beings who existed before humanity evolved. The Necrons continue their preparations, gathering strength and knowledge for the campaigns ahead. And somewhere in the vast Imperium, the loss of one Reaver-class Titan on a forgotten world is a footnote in reports that no one will ever read. One more casualty in a war that has consumed entire civilizations and shows no signs of ending. Two ancient powers, one old beyond measure and one merely ancient by human standards, connected by chance and circumstance, preparing for conflicts that will shape the future of the galaxy. The discovery of a sleeping Titan in a Necron tomb is more than just an unusual occurrence. It is a microcosm of the larger story, a single example of how the layers of history pile upon one another in a galaxy old enough to have forgotten entire civilizations. It reminds us that in Warhammer 40,000, nothing is ever truly lost. Nothing is ever truly forgotten, and the past has a way of reaching forward to shape the present in unexpected and often catastrophic ways. And it shows us that even the most improbable events can have profound consequences when they occur at the intersection of powers great enough to shake stars from their courses and burn worlds to ash. Thank you for watching this exploration of what happens when Necrons find a sleeping Titan in their tomb. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Warhammer 40,000 lore, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There is always more to discover in the grim darkness of the far future, and we will continue to explore these stories together. Until next time, may your armies be victorious and your dice rolls blessed by the Emperor, the Omnissiah, or whatever gods you choose to follow in the endless wars of the 41st millennium.